This conversation is taking place at the DuPont Environmental Center in the Russell W. Peterson Wildlife Refuge.
We're at the DuPont Environmental Education Center in Wilmington, talking with Susan Love, who's a planner with the Delaware Coastal Program, which is a division of the Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. I am a member of the Sea Level Rise Advisory Committee representing businesses in Delaware. And Susan's task is to facilitate our discussions, which have been going on for about a year and a half. Susan, what's sea level rise?
Basically, sea level rise means that the level of the oceans is rising a little bit, and that high tide is encroaching inland slowly over time. It has been happening for millions of years as a natural cycle, but we're very concerned about it right now because scientists believe that the rate of sea level rise that we're experiencing right now in the state of Delaware, which is about 3.3 millimeters per year, is going to accelerate in the future. With that acceleration, that means that that water is going to encroach onto Delaware at a much higher rate, and that might make it more difficult for us to deal with it the way that we have been dealing with it through shoreline stabilization, beach replenishment programs, raising roads, raising buildings and such. So it's very important right now for us to take a look at what's happening with the rate of sea level rise and what our response is so that we're not taken unawares in the future when things start to become very problematic.
There's about 40 of us that have been meeting a pretty regular basis, about every 6 weeks, for about a year and a half. What's the product that we're producing now?
So the committee has two outcomes. The committee is going to produce a vulnerability assessment, which basically is going to define the problem of sea level rise to the state of Delaware. And we have completed that, and we're working on publishing that document right now. The other thing, so we've defined the problem, and that's taken about a year and a half. Now we have to do the hard part, which is to come up with some solutions to that problem. How are we going to respond to the problems that we've defined? Are we going to abandon structures and move away from the coast? Are we going to build seawalls? Are we going to make our communities more resilient to storm flooding? All of those things are the discussions that this committee is going to have. So when we're done, we're going to have a resource for state governments, local governments, citizens, and businesses that they can go to and see, these are the problems that I might be having in the future, and here are some solutions that I may need to do. And the solutions are going to be at all levels. The federal government, the state government, the local government all have a role. Citizens have a role. Businesses have a role. So everybody is going to be making choices at a lot of different levels. We're hoping to make that a little bit easier.
Let's put this in context that people can understand. How much is the sea rising, and at what pace? You talked about 3.3 milliliters. Well, that doesn't scare anybody.
No.
It's in a foreign language even, see. So talk about feet, and talk about the pace that this sea level is rising.
If you take that 3.3 millimeters that I talked about and take it over 100 years, we're talking about 13 inches, just a little over a foot of sea level rise over the past century. So that's fairly significant, but over someone's lifespan. In the next 88 years, we have projections that go out to the year 2100. So in the next 88 years, we're looking at projections of between 1/2 meter and 1.5 meters of sea level rise. So that's between 1.6 feet and about 4.5 feet. But we're very concerned about how we respond now so that future generations aren't left with some massive, massive problems when we're gone.
Some places are more vulnerable than others, even coastal places. Where are the places where, if you will, the most inundation is likely to occur?
Places like South Wilmington, where there's high density development, redevelopment, infrastructure, sewer systems, the Port of Wilmington. This is very vulnerable for the state of Delaware because it's such an economic driver. And as you go down south, in Kent County, a lot of the vulnerable resources are not things that are valuable, are infrastructure to people, but the natural resources in Kent County that have been preserved. And then, of course, as you go down to the beaches, certainly beach communities are impacted, but also communities In the inland bays, communities like Milford, Milton, any community that's on a river.
And the one thing with sea level rise is that the storms are becoming more dangerous.
As the level of high tide rises, when you have the same kind of storm on top of a higher water level, the impacts go further inland. Just as if Hurricane Irene hit us at low tide, which was very fortunate for us. If Hurricane Irene had hit us at high tide, the issues that resulted from that storm would have been a lot higher. And similar for sea level rise. As the tide gets higher, when a storm hits, it can push that water further and further. So, and we've already seen this in talking to people throughout the state. We're seeing people who say, you know, my land was dry for years, and in the past 10 years, I'm losing land. It never flooded here before. Farmers aren't able to till a lot of their acreage. So people are actually seeing this, but it's very slow, incremental. And what's likely to happen is that storm tides are going to come in, and people are going to adapt because of storm flooding. Slowly, they're going to raise their roads, their buildings because of storm tides, but that's going to help them adapt. That's a sea level rise adaptation. We're going to see the way that you and I are going to be able to visualize sea level rise is going to be through the impact of storms, not necessarily through that several millimeters a year. Because when you go out to the beach or you go out to the shoreline, water looks like it's in the same place, right? But the storm tides are really where the rubber's going to meet the road at first, and that's really where people are going to start seeing it.
Thanks, Susan.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
My pleasure.
You're connected with Content Delaware.